Welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to our online event within the framework of the 5th anniversary of the Berghof Foundation. Today, our topic will relate to the Georgian Abkhaz conflict and the question how to gain confidence, regain confidence, build up trust. And the Berghof Foundation, as you may know, was founded by Mr. Georg Zundel in 1972. He passed away a few years ago in 2007. I myself joined the Berghof Foundation 29 years ago, so I feel close to this organization. And I remember very well how we celebrated and prepared for the 25th anniversary.
Я помню, как мы праздновали 25-ю.
At that time, the director, Norbert Ruppers, was preparing to engage in the Georgian Abkhaz dialogues. And since then, actually, the Berghof Foundation works in these communities. Before I introduce our guests, let me say some technical issues about the structure of that meetings. We having an audience which can participate in the discussion by writing comments or questions. The working languages of this meeting are English and Russian. We, the people who are discussing the issues, will not see the questions. A colleague of mine, Itzhak Rusbakov, will analyze and read your chat comments and comes in later by presenting some of those. Well, we are also having, we could have now a little questionnaire for you to see who is all participating in this event. So if my colleagues are showing you this link, you can participate in this poll. As I said, there it is. Well, okay. Well, as I said, this is the working languages of this meeting are Russian and English. We are having two interpreters with us who are working on two separated channels. So you should choose now the exact channel for your right question, for your right language. And I think we are waiting for the results soon of this, but it will, of the questionnaire, but it will come in. Well, let me start to introduce our guests, actually. And it would be nice, I know that was, I mean, could we see all our guests now in this, with a video, I think, and not just one by one? That's great, it works. Well, let me start in the very east. From Tbilisi, we are having here today Ucha Nanuashvili. Ucha is a long time, for decades, he's involved in Georgian Abkhaz issues. Since from 2012 to 2017, he was Ombudsman of Georgia. He was Ombudsman of Georgia, and he's the founder and the director of the Democratic Research Institute. Ucha, great to have you with us. Welcome. Also from Tbilisi, but actually born in Sukhumi, I welcome Misha Jakhua. Misha is also, for many, many years, participant in Georgian Abkhaz meetings and dialogues. He worked as a lawyer for the Georgian Young Lawyers Association. For several years now, he works for the Berghof Foundation and is one of our coordinators in Tbilisi and Georgia. Misha, warm welcome to you. Hi. Also based in Tbilisi currently is Oleg Project. He is the UN Peace and Development Advisor for the South Caucasus, and he engaged now in recent years very much with several meetings and conferences on these issues, how to build and energize confidence building initiatives and dynamics. And I would say Oleg seeks for inspiration and tries to create dynamic situations. Oleg, warm welcome to you. And from Sukhum, I welcome Dalila Pilia. Dalila is the founder and the director of an Abkhaz NGO called World Without Violence. She also is associate professor and lecturer at Abkhaz State University. And like Misha, she works for many years now and is one of the coordinators of Berghof Foundation's work in Abkhazia. And Dalila, it's great to see you here in our online roundtable. Welcome. Last but not least is the journalist Inal Khashyg. Inal, based in Sukhum, is chief editor of an independent analytical newspaper called Chegemskaya Pravda. And if I may say so, Inal is a man that not shies away to address complex issues. Inal, great to have you with us here today. Welcome. Well, my name is Oliver Woolley, and today I'm not a student at the Berghof Foundation anymore. I'm the head of the Europe unit, and I moderate this meeting here today. I'm trying to be an active moderator, so we'll see. So let's start with the discussion. We are having more or less 1 hour, 50 minutes for us. Then we are trying to relate to the questions from the audience. And a last word maybe to our interpreters. It's also like telling to myself, if things are too fast for you, please give the speaker yourself a feedback, you know, because I cannot see this or hear this. All right. Well, when it comes to the issue...
Thank you.
When it comes to the issue of confidence and confidence building, I like to say or start by saying that actually large parts of the Georgian population and large parts of the Abkhaz population have actually quite a similar attitude towards it because they actually think it's not needed. On the Georgian side, we could say there is quite a notion of brothers. Abkhaz and Georgians are brothers and sisters. They lived in harmony for a long time. The problem is actually not really there. It's more a problem of external intervention. And if you have this understanding, then of course, confidence building is actually not what is needed. On the Abkhaz side, for totally different reasons, people have the same attitude, many. There is an understanding, there was a war, the war 1992, 1993. Abkhazia won it. With 2008, Abkhazia gained some state recognition. And for them, the conflict is basically over. And also for these groups, the issue is not anymore to relate to Georgia or to talk to Georgians. So put it this way, these are different but somehow similar challenges we are facing if we come to the question of confidence building. So let me start with Misha. Misha, how do you see it? Is there a need for confidence building? And if so, why?
Добрый день, спасибо, Оливер, за вопрос.
Greetings, thank you, Oliver, for questions, and thanks to Berghof Foundation
for inviting our guests to webinar. The question that you asked can have very simple, straightforward answer. We need peacekeeping process which will make sure long-time peace But in our societies, we also come across with
Наши общества меньше стали знакомы друг с другом. Они менее понимают.
Извини, we are having problem with the translate. I hear you now in Russian.
I'm sorry, yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. Может быть, начнете с самого начала, я прошу прощения. Да, можете или начать сначала, если вас не затруднит сначала, если начнете. Да. So, the peacekeeping process that we need, we have started to recognize each other and started to get to know each other, but we less understand what is perceived in certain segments of society because they simply don't know each other. And as a result, we are facing the emotions and statements that we see in publicly generally. And the function of peacekeeping process is not just to adjust to the statements, but to investigate the causes why these emotions came up, and try to understand and explain these positions can be done by us, because we are the inheritors of all these processes. Myself, as a participant of Natterbeck process, in this process, we try to listen to each other and take narrative and geographical areas and talk to people who went through this conflict and they had to leave lives as a result of the conflict. And we meet with them and we conduct discussions, and based on their attitudes, we raise questions, quite painful questions, which are very important to both societies, Georgians and Abkhaz societies. And they actually show their positioning. And we try to find the dialogue of past and what they had to go through, and we need to continue doing this about present, how present is being formed, how present emotions are being formed, which basically influence the reality and present. When this process moves to a bilateral level, people can try to explain to another party that what is behind their position, and after that the process of understanding comes up, what is behind this, and then the perception comes in, and what steps can be taken and what steps can be understood in different societies or different segments. Let me bring you certain examples. For present times, for long times, basically, we see that positions are tightly linked to people who suffered from war, and they are openly talking to each other about this, and they become more in loop and more understandable about that, and then they feel certain fear to go back to Abkhazia, and the same goes for another party, and for IDPs is the same. And when we observe And these revanchist or aggressive statements are quite rare, basically. And what we see publicly, we also see some sentimental approaches, and we see some realistic issues behind these things. And if we dive into this issue, if we don't dive into this issue, then we get stuck in formal approaches, and it may even lead to repetition of the tragedy, and which is also positioning itself quite rarely. And Georgian participants have the same basically sentiments as Abkhaz older generation who went through war in 90s. There is a perception that there is a Georgia which is a potential aggressor and has potential aggressive sentiment.
Yes.
And because there's no such question in Georgian society among youngsters. They don't think like that, and they don't really meet this type of positioning. And that's why we need to create direct channels of communication, so that we need to have this type of sentiments. We could have both type of sentiments, and how what has been changed, and how far young generation is from this type of sentiments.
Misha, may I come in? So I see you are highlighting the need for, you several times you highlighted this emotional element. Yeah, and an emotional element of understanding each other's emotions and a process of creating empathy. Yeah,
Empathy.
yeah, empathy.
Empathy.
So is this, but what do you do with those people who are still holding up the notion very much of there is harmony, there is no problem between Georgian and Abkhaz? Yeah, how do you address this element? Who sees the problem only as an external intervention?
Наш ответ на этот вопрос
Our answer,
и мы пытаемся вовлекать таких людей, которые так размышляют, но с другой стороны мы не ходим в спор с ними, потому что лично я считаю, что за этими позициями тоже, помимо политических, геополитических моментов, также стоят и человеческие переживания. И мы пытаемся раскрыть разговор об этом, потому что то же самое, когда мы слушаем их отношение к третьему лицу, мы думаем, что я считаю, что это тоже связано с их переживаниями, с их эмоциональными шоком, который они перенесли во время 2008 войны 2008 года. Но мы тоже, я извиняюсь, я слышу английский перевод. Нет, вы должны переключиться.
No, so
Я должен переключить. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so now it's English. Yeah, да, переведите, пожалуйста, продолжите. Я
Хорошо, я попытаюсь раскрыть эту мысль, потому что
I'll try to open up this idea. We say, we talk about the causes of this, because it has its even causes, emotional shocks that younger generation has had to go through in 2008. when they participate in this process, they see clearly the same emotional shocks were in 92, 93, the same positioning had the first war, like the war in 2008. Why for Abkhaz society this is true, and this is really influential and influences their today's status? What does it change? This is a quite often asked question.
Thank you, Misha. We come to these elements a little later. Let me move on and stay a little moment more in Tbilisi. Ucha, you are one of the persons, you know, even back in the year 2007, you are one of the initiators of what was called then in English, the Sorry campaign. Or in Georgian, forgive my pronunciation, the Bodishi campaign. Yeah? This campaign is certainly directing to the past and to the war 1992-1993. What were your thoughts? What were your hopes at the time with this campaign? Why did you do it?
Thank you for organizing this event. Yes. Panelists and participants. Yes, Sorry campaign was launched in March 2007 by the Human Rights Center, where I worked at the time as a director. And our idea was to change the dynamics and directions of the relationships between Abkhazians and Georgians. And main messages of this initiative included admitting and apologizing for past wrongs, past mistakes and crimes during the war, and also deconstructing enemy images. We said sorry to Abkhaz people for not having hindered in the war, for not having been able to avoid the disaster and the war, and it was a public. Yes, and we started some kind of discussion in Georgian society. We started with an appeal to Abkhaz people with such a letter, but in fact, this campaign was addressed to Georgian society. Georgian society, why? Because we wanted to have a discussion among Georgian society, among Georgians, about our mistakes, about our crimes, about our problems, and to have some kind of self-critical approach. And we wanted to encourage people to think about the horrors of the war and the mistakes we made in the early 90s. And at the same time, we also started to polarize Abkhazian language and Abkhazian culture in Tbilisi. We have published first Abkhazian website, first Abkhazian newspaper, also prepared some events and publications in different languages, including on Muhajirs, genocide, etc. But main idea behind this campaign was to have to change Georgian society, to rethink about the war, and to have a frank and open discussion in Georgia about the causes of the conflict, about the war, and about the reasons why we started this war, in fact, and to have frank discussion with, first of all, with Georgia, and then, of course, with Abkhaz people.
How were your, how did it go? In the year 2007, yes. I remember in the Georgian public, the notion of the Georgian Abkhaz war, 1992-93, was still very established. Yeah,
yes.
While it got lost somehow, it disappeared in the discourse after 2008 a lot. Yeah. So how did it go in your campaign?
Well, in fact, we had very negative reactions in Georgian society. Majority of population, not only population, including high-ranking officials, even President Saakashvili at that time has criticized the campaign twice. And we had also quite negative comments from different politicians, including, like some politicians, MPs, yes, but also we had some positive reactions in Georgian society. And but like it was in fact, this campaign has succeeded, despite the fact that it was not published, despite the fact that mainstream media has blocked information about the sorry campaign because it was not popular, it was not safe that time in Georgia, to say sorry and to discuss issues like this in Georgian society. And especially Georgian media, only few small, like let's say radio stations, Radio Liberty, and some online editions, highlighted this actions and campaign. But majority of televisions or society were not happy about this action. But anyway, this campaign, in my opinion, has succeeded because many people speak about it now. And yes, and now everybody thinks about it. In fact, it was a provocation in positive, and this provocation worked. It was a concept, to Georgian society to see that is this, yes, that time 14 years ago, the story was taboo. Speaking about this topic was neither popular at the time, and yes, but slowly we started some different public actions, and we had at that time quite a militarist approach in the Georgian society. We had a different government, and it was not easy for us. Even we also experienced some kind of intimidation, threats, and we were declared as traitors and enemies of the state, etc. But at the end, we can see that this campaign has worked because we can see some results now.
We can use the space today to talk about these issues. Is bigger in Georgia today?
Yeah, I think that today the situation has absolutely changed. And for us, it was that time. It was main purpose for us was to, to have a message to Abkhaz people and Georgian people that. There is a different Georgia too. There are other people in this country with different ideas, with different mentality or visions and values. And most of the Georgian society at that time were quite negative about this campaign. But now we can see that step by step the situation has changed, especially after 2008 war. And we can see that this chain of hatred has breaked, and we can see that, as Georgian society has acknowledged some problems, and you can see that this campaign has some kind of follow-up, and it also, and what was the idea behind this campaign? That after this physical violence and war and conflict, still continues, in the heart of the people, and we try to explain people that hatred and anger controls human lives for a long time, and those emotions paralyze people and make them hostages of hatred. And when person is under this, occupied with anger and hatred, he or she cannot clearly evaluate situation, and that's why sorry campaign might be the first step to break this negative circle, and it creates awareness. Yes.
I think so. I think so too. I mean, also the sorry campaign, personally for me as an observer, was an important milestone in all these decades, and inspired us to think about new methods, how to address these difficult issues, because it's difficult to address it for both sides. And actually, I like then to move to Sukhum and to see, maybe Dalila. We heard how also difficult it is, or is it difficult to talk about the past in Abkhazia? And on the one hand, as an external observer, I would say the Abkhaz society people permanently relate to the past, to the violent past. the war is very present in the minds and hearts of Abkhaz people. Today, a little less than 10 years ago, but still, yet still, it's really not easy to address these topics in a constructive way. And also not when it comes to relation to Georgians. So where do you see Abkhazia today? Or the Abkhaz people, so to speak.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Очень приятно видеть вас всех. Не менее важна та проблема, которая обсуждается, дискутируется, несмотря на то, что такое немалое количество лет прошло со дня грузино-абхазской войны, но...
Извините, пожалуйста, do we have interpretation? I don't get it on English.
It's going in English. English?
Okay. Dalila, пожалуйста.
Yes, please. If we are saying about peacekeeping or peace loving, what Abkhaz society manifests from this point of view, you can't really describe this in 1-2 words. This is just contradicting. This is just different problems within the society, and this is quite normal to any society, and because there is no single unified issue to this type. And if we talk about peacekeeping, and if we could decide this by workshops, it could have been great, but the problem is much broader, much more complex, and much more complicated, because the war itself was on Abkhaz territory. And you know very well, you've been to Abkhazia several times, and there is no single family that has not, unfortunately, suffered from war, but we have to move away from war rhetoric, and we need to move away from tragedy, and not to hold a knife in your pocket, or because this is self-destructing. And as for our process, Misha was saying about IDPs and refugees, and this is a tragic fate of entire generation, because war ends and those who were instigators of the war, or they left, and we have quite well-informed audience, and I was a member of many processes when Supreme Council on Refugees was conducting many seminars on receiving back IDPs, because Georgian political elite convinced this category that they have to go to Abkhazia altogether. This is one. And this was just elaborated for IDPs and refugees. And the stumbling point was where they're going, back to Georgia or Abkhazia. Nobody wanted to say that they were going back to Abkhazia. They wanted to stay in Georgia, and return back to Georgia. But the real story is, and the real situation is, that we are divided by first war. There are many legal issues, international relation issues, but there have been no single relation with Abkhazia for 27 years. But those who wanted to come to live in Abkhazia, they can do it. And there is a big cluster of people who want to come and live, and they perceive this as their motherland. I have talked to them personally, and they accept this. As for the Hatams, this is a step that we need to underline as a positive development. However, along with that, behind this call, there were several calls to people. I have seen it myself. I'm not talking about the what was the rationale behind that, and I had my negative reservations about that, but I want to say that it's good that things like that comes up. But publishing books in Abkhazian language, and groups are being formed to learn Abkhaz language, and creating groups to preserve Abkhazian culture, Abkhaz culture. And Georgian Chabadze is actually very helpful, and he's trying to provide some. Well, we became a people without history, and so you know what was going on in Abkhazia and what is really taking place. I would have accepted this if there was nothing political along with that.
Dalila,
why they're not receiving this in Abkhazia?
May I ask you, we heard, I mean, from Ucha, from Misha, we heard that there is more space today in Georgia to discuss the past, more than 10 years ago or so. I actually agree to this. What is your assessment of that? Do Abkhaz find serious discussion partners in Georgian society who want to discuss openly the suffering and the happenings on both sides?
Вы знаете, мне трудно сказать, потому что я очень
It is difficult to say because I don't know very well Georgian society. However, with my colleagues that I work with, there are several of them who take our problems seriously, and the same is true from our side. The tragedy that Georgian people went through, and we welcome these peacekeeping initiatives, and we accepted this peace-loving or peace and respect to each other. And we started to talk about very difficult moments of our life, during the military campaign or after military campaign, but we still respect each other. But there is people change, and the youngsters become older, and other generation who hasn't seen war. It would be disaster to say that Abkhazia lives only with memories of war. And we know that we need to keep going, we need to keep working. because we don't have any leverages of influencing political decisions. And this is not our basically task, but within the frames of our opportunities, we can engage as much stakeholders or players, if you like. It would be
большая польза нашего проекта.
It would be a great, benefit of our project.
Yes. Dalila, спасибо. About possible further steps in the future or leverage, we can speak a little later. Ina, let me come to you. I mean, we heard that there is in Abkhaz society a good amount of skepticism when it comes to any kind of relations with Georgian people, discussions, engagement. Is the interpretation working? Okay. Where do you see the logic there? I mean, these people have a good reason to be skeptical. But how do you see this? What does it mean, the skepticism within Abkhaz society or for Abkhaz politics, for the whole situation?
Oliver, I have problems with interpretation, but I will. Can you repeat this?
Okay.
Yeah.
Repeat. Okay. Thank you.
I'm relating to this skepticism within Abkhaz society, about dialogue or discussions with Georgian society. And my question is, what does it mean for the, why is this? And what does it do with the Abkhaz society as such, this skepticism?
Я понял, Оливер. У меня просто проблема с переводом английского. Русский перевод я не слышу, поэтому мне сложно.
I don't see Russian. I can't hear. Russian translation.
Is it the channels? Are we on the right channels with translation? I mean, I'm now not knowing what's going on. Is it technical or?
He doesn't hear translation, so I'm translating for him your question.
You are translating?
He's just on all wrong.
Начал, и ты перебил, Оливер.
Yeah, let me just to translate. Yeah, то есть существует скептицизм
Then go on.
В обществе по поводу диалога с грузинским обществом. Откуда этот скептицизм и как вы смотрите на этот скептицизм? Оправдан, мешает ли он процессу? И вопрос был об этом, Оливера, да?
Да.
Skepticism has always been there in Abkhaz society, and we behind all these campaigns, and of course I don't have any doubts that there were some sincere campaigns about good things, but political elite of Georgia and maybe others, they also skeptical. And in 1993, when war ended up to 2008, it is being forgotten. And there was always a danger of new war. And Abkhazia was not initiating any campaign, military campaigns, but this was coming rather from Georgia. A microphone is. After that, there is no threat of war, but however, but anyways, skepticism is still there, and I think that we need to understand that Georgia has been transformed after 2008, and all rhetoric of whoever it is, opposition or position, and they say that Abkhazia is occupied territory and ideological machine has been working still in the same tune, and they still believe that Abkhazia is occupied territory, and Abkhaz are suffering from this occupation, and they are silent and they cannot really make any difference. And this rhetoric is very difficult, of course.
Yes.
And there's no Abkhaz society does not believe Georgian, and Mikhail Saakashvili invented this for Abkhazia and for South Ossetia, but now we can see that this slogan that Russia is actually the third party and is not interested to resolve the and there is a lone occupation, and there is no other new messages that are coming, and that's why there is some skepticism in Abkhaz society. Half a year ago, there were certain actions that when icon was brought to Ilori church, and there was a attempt to reconcile with Abkhaz clergy, and this should not be done by populist some politicians, but this should be an opinion of Georgia's political elite. And the position of Georgian political establishment is quite simple. It hasn't been changed since Shevardnadze, that Abkhazia should be part of Georgia. Maybe rhetoric became softer, milder, but it hasn't been changed. And this is why there is a skepticism, because half a year ago in Abkhazia, we received concept paper, president signed foreign relations concept signed by president of Abkhazia, and Abkhazia denied to engage in negotiation with Georgia, and this was based on the Abkhaz population. But at the same time, Tbilisi hasn't heard anything constructive. But this concept signed by Aslan Bjania was perceived as a capitulation, and the next step would be maybe Abkhazia will go back to Georgia under Georgia's jurisdiction. When Georgian society or political establishment wrongly perceives some peacekeeping issues, they cannot really perceive any signals as a sign of weakness. So we leave behind this Abkhaz Georgia negotiation process, and we cannot keep living in illusion that something misunderstanding happened, that Abkhaz and Georgians got into fight, and it will pass on and everything will be fine. But this is just an illusion, and nothing good will come out of this illusion. Yeah, I do understand that there is hatamas in when Georgians apologize to Abkhaz, but Georgians should actually discuss why they are apologizing and what was the mistake that they have made. And maybe we can come to, well, our discussion should have depths, or we should go in depth and look into deeper into the causes of the conflict. Uh, and any idea that Abkhazia will go back to Georgia, that's the main cause of skepticism. And this is what is really related with the dialogue. And that's why Georgians always talk about restoration of territorial integrity. And this is really, this has no perspective and no future. And that's where we should really look into the cause, the real cause of the skepticism.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, your statement went through many levels of actors, so to speak. Yeah, you should, and the official positions both sides have are totally clear, and you're right. I totally agree that populistic attitudes, populistic initiatives. You mentioned, for instance, the Ilori icon issue, but we could also say something like the Shipsia campaign from Georgia. Yeah, I hope the pronunciation was good. In English, the Hello campaign that was once made by Georgia. It's a campaign that ignores the sorrow of the past and is actually just built on the assumption of, brother and sisterhood. And as you described, the Abkhaz are somehow occupied, and now comes a nice and friendly Shipsia from Georgia. And I understand that in such a context, then this populistic initiatives, even if they may have a positive intention, are not well received. On the other hand, I see clearly also here from the speakers the space where we can dive, not just in the causes of the conflict, but also what the conflict did with the people in Abkhazia and in Georgia. And also, and that many people suffered from this dynamics, although they were not fighting. Let me address our last guest. It was a long time, Oleg, you must wait. And it's great that you could jump in with the interpretation. It's always good to have other third party at the table. Oleg, you've been addressing in your position the topic with dealing with the past, as you called it. You have organized several conferences and meetings in Georgia on this issue. Obviously, you think that confidence building on the basis of mutual interest is not enough, and that emotional and also the experiences of people and the reality of the past needs to be addressed. It's not an easy discussion, right? It's not an easy process to start and to engage. What are your... No, how do you see it?
Да, я думаю, что...
Yes, I believe that the process is not easy. And Berghof Foundation job, which is done, is very important job. It's a leader in this area, and important element of this is that the engagement is quite wide, a wide number of people. I think Misha mentioned that past is not just past, is a part of the present policy that we have to talk about, and the UN system tries also to support civil society and in terms of work with past, not only in Georgia, but also in Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we believe that it is important. And I do not really agree, Oliver, that systematic discussion or ecological problems or economic problems or medical problems, issues, they're not effective. They actually conducive to building trust, confidence. What Berghof Foundation does is really very good supplementary work. People look not only just in economic interests and other interests, but also it is important to have empathy, right? To feel in a global UN system in Latin America, in other places, dialogue, only thematic dialogue is not enough. And dialogue which is conducive for empathy elaboration is much more effective. What I wanted to say also, what Inal mentioned, as an observer, I think there are some very important discussions in Georgia, and civil society organizations are discussing these issues, and Ucha can also elaborate on that. And the campaign of sorry is something really fragmental. There will be some others, and fundamental political problem, of course, could be different with respect to status, political status, but there is, between these political issues, there is a big area or room for improvement. And Georgian intellectuals really say that people to people relationship and dialogue, when people come to Georgia to have tests on COVID-19, and this is something very small part of the outcome. And what needs to be changed is the perception to the status, so that we can transform the conflict. Transformation of conflict can also be political. However, we would rather have the same developments as it is in Transnistria or other conflict areas, and we can do that. I think I would love to believe that Georgian society work on transformation of Abkhaz-Georgian conflict, but it's not just recognition of Abkhaz statehood. If we talk about normal relationship establishment, there is a big stumbling points or barriers that Georgia has built itself. We need to look into this law on occupation, and basically Abkhaz can only breathe without permission of Georgia if we look at the law on occupation. So other things
I understand. It's
they cannot go to study, they cannot go to travel, they cannot travel. There is many things that are not related to recognition or acknowledgement. So Georgian society should really make change that this law on occupation should go away, because this is wrong for Georgians, misleading for Georgians itself.
Because I understand, and of
Иллюзию
course,
грузинского общества, что абхазов можно вот таким вот способом.
So this is basically a bad approach, that you can get Abkhazia back only by having this law on occupation.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear there is a legal and structure and concept papers that are affecting the whole way the current conflict dynamic. The law on occupation, you said, on occupied territories. There are other papers, they exist on the Georgian side, papers exist on the upper side, you know, like the step towards the future. But let's not go into the details of this at the moment, yeah? Because we wanted to see of what's the potential of civil society. And there is one question that's in the room, and it is the question of how do we relate, how do both societies relate to the violent past and to violence that may be used today. Because we don't speak about the past just for historical reasons. It's a question that is, the question in the room is, will a kind of Georgian Abkhaz war ever repeat? And this is a question that must be answered because if there is uncertainty on this question, how should you cooperate? How should you live? The situation we have today cannot be called peace. The absence of war is not peace. So, Inal, you highlighted that the conflict goes on and that it also contains maybe element of brutality, you know, of other forms of violence. However, how do we transform it? And just to say the laws should all change is not working. We need to have more understanding of who we are and how we would like to relate to this past and to the future. And I think I heard from several speakers here. Let me ask you, let me check, because it was maybe lost in the translation, I'm not sure. Ucha, do you think the Georgian society would ever attack Abkhazia again?
You know, something has changed here. And if you remember, you know, some years ago, 10, 20 years ago, we had the main slogan, we will gain Abkhazia back. No, it was about the land. And now I think the majority of Georgia are talking about the relationship with Abkhaz people, to regain trust with Abkhazia. And this is, I think, main changes which happened maybe during the last 10 years. And society is not in favor of revenge. And this is a serious changes, you know. And why this happens that we have some institutions already. We have civil society, which is quite active. Media also is quite active. So different initiatives. And so now, that's why, you know, like, so we can see that there are some chances for cooperation and changes. But
thanks. I mean, we could, sometimes it's always good to understand why something is, yeah? But it's not always needed to know it exactly. You know, I love my wife, but I haven't still understood actually why is it. Let me double check with Misha. What do you think? Will Georgia attack Abkhazia? Will there be another war?
I think that there is no indications to think about that. Maybe in some circles they think about it, but our society, we have passed this. When there was a war in Karabakh, mountainous Karabakh, and even there was no any moment of um, dealing with military solution. I think this was quite a big test that we have passed, and I agree with Ucha that that's why we need to talk to each other and to extend this peacekeeping process. We will have to deal with politicians, and we will always have to deal with even the politicians who are oriented on conflicts, but that's not the fact, right? That there will be war.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation. It's a challenging question, but I actually like to know. It would be good to hear. Dalila, Inal, maybe Dalila, you first. What do you think? Do you think a Georgian Abkhaz war would repeat, or how? Oh, I'm getting the sign on asking.
Первое, что приходит на ум,
first, what comes into my mind is God forbids. Oh, God forbids that as a woman, so I don't really want to see a war. Or even today, what we've been talking about today, and this, what happened in Karabakh quite recently, we have discussed after, shortly after Karabakh conflict, we both, from Georgian side and from Abkhaz side, we came together and talked about this. And we agreed that you can't really get closer to peace with war. And there is an interview we always listen to a young man who was fighting in Abkhazia. He wasn't going to go to war in Abkhazia, but his friend was killed and he went there to seek revenge, but during the war he lost many other friends, and his resume was basically that you can't really achieve peace with war rhetoric. You have to explore other options and other concepts, and I would like to hope that our work and using the outcomes of our work, there are many of us, and both in Abkhazia and in Georgia, and even if they're not active, they may not look active, but they really understand that there is no alternative to peace, because we have already seen in the past what war was, and we know how dangerous is the war rhetoric is, and it is very provoking, so to speak, and even some peacekeeping steps from civil society organizations can bear some results. And we always say, look at the Georgia scientists, and they are basically propagating for peace. And if we see that, we will always echo that. And this seeking revenge is very dangerous for Georgia and for Abkhazia. And Abkhazia is a very small country, and Georgia is not a China either. So, and to survive the second war, would be very difficult for both Georgians and for Abkhaz. And we have seen it once, right? Why do we need to think about it again? So, but I would like to use this moment from political elites. We don't see they're really, they're not eager to see peace, and the Geneva process is not really productively used, because this, and this is the only platform that they can use, and we really want to expand this. And maybe I personally confident that our process, more and more people are eager to get in, and these people are the ones that they don't want to go to war, and this is really the number one step of
Dalila, thanks a lot. I mean,
peace
you opened up new,
process.
even covering Geneva, which is really another topic. Listen, the question on war, on will it repeat, is not answered. You know, it's a process. But I also think, as an observer, and having heard you, something has changed. We are not in the year 2007. And we are having in both societies, this is my conviction, the potential to really address the problems in a civilized way. And of course, this will include discussion on laws and policy, or also on issues, you know, we hear every day in the news, the life of Georgians in Abkhazia. There are many issues, but as long as we find a way really to get agreement on that, the problem must, that everybody believes that there is enough goodwill to solve the problems peacefully, I think it's a great step. And we are close to this, actually. The conditions are there. My dear guests, we are having here still the questions and answers, which we must come in. And so I would like to ask my colleague to, you know, give us a little insights and present some of them, please.
Thank you very much for very interesting discussions. We have coming, we have got 50 questions. I will take at least 2 questions which relates to our topic, and I hope that this is not the final meeting. The question number 1 is that we've been discussing. Dalila and Misha Jakhua talked about the process, and other speakers also mentioned that the question is, do you feel the change from participants, and what was the most difficult in that change? And Misha said, and I will ask the second question. And second question, what are the elements that are impediments of peace process? So let's start from question number 1.
Yes, we heard it. I mean, Misha, Dalila, you like to start, and then Misha, and is it for both, right?
Let me start. Thank you for the question. Very interesting question, by the way, because this is a question that I have been thinking about constantly, perpetually. This is very difficult, complex as a process. And the more we work in this process, the more I get to understand, not only me, but my colleagues, we are doing a very important job. Well, I wouldn't say that, well, initially they took us seriously, but when we assembled once, second time, third time, and we do it at Zoom conferences, at workshops, at when people speak out and they come to conclusions that we need to keep going and to continue this work, and we managed to really explain where we start to listen to people's ideas, people's problems, and then try to explain what could be done around this topic was. So, and how we can really direct questions. This is really dependent upon the outcome, how we do the process. And well, initially we were perceived quite skeptically, but now I can tell you that there are many people who understand the necessity of us to continue working, because there are some campaigns online, and they see us as someone who really think about solutions, and they also get along with us well. I don't mean anonymous people, but I'm talking about just regular citizens who listen to us and talk to us, and they underline that we really benefit a lot, or there's only a narrow spring between us as a border, right? And that's why the necessity of dialogue, peace, the necessity of relationship, interaction, due to the project that we have, this platform, and it creates the process that we can engage more and more people. This is not an easy thing to do at all, but this takes constant exchange of views, listening. It takes very good listening skills. We don't have only workshops, we have like evening saloons, and over 500 interviews we have conducted, and I haven't seen a single person who said, why do you do that? And this is useless. What we do is really, really important.
Daira, thank you. Misha, maybe short so that we can also come to the second.
I'll try to be brief. First, where the process is being changed. Yes, this is being changed in each of us, and this dramatization of war is being changed also. You actually, when you listen to those who went through tragic wars, they basically tell us this horror that war brings. And the more we listen to people, the less we actually think of repeating it. As for the dialogue and process, what is really difficult is basically to accept the question and still not to go on and not to get into alternative sort of alternative solutions. So to me, who has been participating in this process, there is no simple answer to these complex questions. So thank you for this very interesting questions.
Maybe the second question, or maybe even a third. If there are 50 in, maybe we can cover a bit more than two.
Second question, what are the impediments for peace promotion and peace support? And second question to Dalila, it is in English. I will read it in English.
Georgian people in Abkhazia, and how do you think what can yourself that
Пожалуйста.
Can the people do instead?
Пожалуйста, вы можете чуть-чуть пояснее и помедленнее это сказать?
Не слышно.
No, it's that. Do you hear me? I think it didn't went through to Dalila.
Yes.
It's that maybe we say the question simply in Russian, directed to her.
Да.
Okay.
То есть вопрос, если суммировать его, он заключается, что молодые люди могут сделать для того, чтобы эти боли, которые в результате войны имеются, чтобы они зажили. Что могут молодые люди в Грузии сделать для этого процесса?
Ну, прежде всего, спасибо огромное за вопрос. Я работаю с молодыми людьми, я знаю их настроение, я отслеживаю их уже более 25 лет. Если первое время молодые люди вообще не хотели слышать о Грузии, о грузинской молодежи абсолютно ничего, то я вижу, как постоянно и постепенно меняется это настроение.
They never wanted to talk about this. They never wanted to actually, they're badly informed about Georgian youth. So our youth do not really know much about Georgian youth. So I would be for them, so I would only welcome if they meet more regularly, because in 10-15 years they will be leading our nations. So the more they know about each other, it would be better. So they cannot really change much here at this stage, even or especially in political issues. But they can do much more amongst themselves as the generation, and they can do really much for peace building in future. And I believe that that they have to meet each other regularly. I am very sorry that there are no platforms, and I don't really want to go back to this logistical issues. And we are very squeezed in geographically, and our passports are invalid, and our youngsters cannot really travel, and we would really like to our youth to meet each other as often as possible.
Ucha, there is one question especially to you, so I will read it. So the question is, what was the reaction from Abkhaz community to the campaign you are mentioning? How it worked?
Well, we had some positive reactions.
Там была позитивная реакция со стороны абхазского общества. Иногда была также негативная. У меня были встречи с представителями гражданского общества, но в общем реакция была вроде бы нейтральная. И я помню, что Абхазия не была против подобной кампании. И я думаю, что в данный момент грузинский и абхазские народы могут иметь больше возможностей для прямого диалога. И я думаю, что подобные кампании очень важны, и очень важно иметь разные контакты между нашим обществом. И также очень важно говорить о прошлом, о процессах, а также о последствиях войны, о процессе конфликта, и почему эта война была начата, и что случилось где-то 27-28 лет тому назад, чтобы избежать новых напряжений, напряженности, как Оливер уже указал. Отсутствие мира и отсутствие войны не означает мира. Я думаю, что гражданское общество должно предпринять шаги, и мы также определим, что должны предпринять ведущие политики, грузинский и абхазский народ, чтобы в конце концов достигнуть мира и диалога. Я думаю, что наши политики не очень успешно с этой задачей справляются. И вы видите результаты их недостаточной слабой деятельности. И было допущено огромное количество ошибок. И, конечно, может быть, нужно оказать влияние на политиков, чтобы это также изменили нарратив. И я думаю, что также нужно деполитизировать этот процесс. Мы должны даже вспомнить о правах человека, потому что Грузия и Абхазия являются конфликтными зонами, и право на передвижение, на образование, на получение медицинской помощи и так далее. Мы должны также вспомнить об этом. И мы также должны вспомнить о переходном справедливости, о военных преступлениях. Мы должны думать об этих вопросах, которые связаны с войной. И мы должны все-таки вспомнить об элементах переходного правосудия. Мы должны обсуждать вопросы жертв. Я думаю, что это долгий процесс. И в первую очередь мы должны деполитизировать этот вопрос. И мы должны сфокусироваться на материальных проблемах, на реальных людях, на правах человека.
Простите, вы можете поменять канал, потому что этот не работает. Канал.
Could you please change the channel because it doesn't work?
Okay. Itzhak, shall we have one more last question?
У нас осталось время на последний вопрос, или вы должны закрыть?
Есть еще один вопрос, который мы, наверное, возьмем как последний.
We will take one more question as the last one. This is to Inal, question to Inal. Inal, please tell us, what does it take to start dialogue between Georgia and Abkhazia, and what would be the main points that you need to start with? I think for dialogue, well, considering what Dalila has said, I'm more pragmatic in this way, and I think there should be some movement from above. It's not from down up, but from up down. It's not just like we all for peace, but we need to look into social channels and social media and see what is really bothering people. And in Georgian Abkhaz conflict, it is important to go back to political process, which both in Tbilisi or Sukhumi. So they have to take responsibility and start negotiations. And when the war was over in 1994, negotiations started. But now we don't see anything like that. Now this conflict has become some kind of an element of internal political fight in both sides, unfortunately. And the Geneva format, it was created after August war, when it was clear that all the formats that had existed before under UN auspices or OSCE and all these mandates didn't work or do not work anymore. And Geneva discussions is something also temporary and or transitional. And well, they suggested, and of course we all agreed, because and Georgians agreed because it's convenient for them. So they don't have anything more than suggesting Abkhazia to join back to Georgia. But the conflict in Karabakh is not enough to show that military prevails always. Basically, we have two different contexts here. In war between Karabakh and Azerbaijan, it's Russia could not really figure out which side they basically support for. So, well, if we take Georgia and Russia, they are still enemies. And if there's a war between Georgia and Russia now, Georgia and Russia now, it would be over sooner than in 2008 and with worse consequences. And so it's not because government changed. No, it's just pragmatic process. And that's why I believe it is important to initiate political will coming from above, so that we know that initiative comes from those who can make a difference. So if there's an initiative which cannot really change anything, then why bother? Yeah. So in this case, maybe if not from the above, maybe at the expert level, you can't really make this dialogue as a subject of very broadly represented and discuss it at the social media platforms, because you will get something really bad, well, something really unproductive. So I'm trying to analyze it as along with what I basically see. So if in Georgian society there's people want to actually make a change, they have to influence their own government. So Abkhaz side has already shown its readiness to start negotiation, and I think Georgians misunderstood this. So we need to start from the above, and the rest will just come along.
Okay.
If you like.
Well, thanks for this. It's fascinating discussion. Also, the last point Inal made, the political will from above. It's always good if it's there, but we see both in Abkhazia and Georgia also that the basis, the civil society, has definitely influence on politicians. And we'll see. I think it's a dynamic. We'll see from above or top down or down up, as you said. There are really interesting interlinkages and to discuss. And I can only say, to conclude this, I mean, the Berghof Foundation is definitely having an approach that works from down up. And we will see how constructive it is, and we will see where it brings us. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, I thank you very much for this interesting discussion. I hope I found it very interesting. It's for me just the beginning. I hope for you too. And I think it's very important that these discussions are being done more in public, because there is a lot of skepticism in both societies about initiatives that are always operating under Chatham House rules, or that pretend that experts in closed rooms can solve the issue. I believe, and the Berghof Foundation believes, that we need more transparency and more openness in these discussions. Also, to experience the diversity of views and opportunities. In this respect, I really like to thank all of you, Dalila, Inal, Oleg, Misha, Ucha. Thanks a lot to Itzat for the questions, and to the team behind the scene, to our interpreters. It was not always easy, but it's fascinating to see how technique makes this kind of meetings possible. The super last question I have, Itzat, what happened to this questionnaire we made? Did it work?
It worked very well. I mean, unfortunately, we cannot show that results, but just to summarize today, around 250 people joined to us. Now we can also see it, so people also can see it. And so 52% were from South Caucasus, 36% from Europe, and other regions 12%. And almost half of them were peace builders, and 3% decision makers, and another half other.
Oh, okay.
So,
thanks for this.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen at the the audience, I hope you enjoyed it. I say thank you to all of you and take care. Bye bye.